Hello, I'm Kirsty Young, and this is a podcast from the Desert Island Discs archive. For rights reasons, we've had to shorten the music. The programme was originally broadcast in 2006, and the presenter was Sue Lawley.
My castaway this week is a politician. 6 months ago, he became the fifth leader of the Conservative Party in 9 years, inheriting an organisation only just beginning to revive after 3 thumping electoral defeats. He's only been an MP for 5 years. Putting him in charge was a gamble the party faithful felt they had to take. Articulate, quick-witted and undeniably clever, he got a first from Oxford. He was brought up in affluent circumstances in the home counties. He worked for Conservative Central Office, then the television company Carlton Communications, before entering Parliament. I think, he says of himself, that I probably have more hinterland than frontland. For me, family, friends and home are the most important thing in my life. If politics interfered with that too much, I'd call it a day. He is, of course, David Cameron. That's very noble new man stuff, David, but it can't last, can it? Because this kind of job eats you alive.
Oh, well, I hope it doesn't, and I don't think it's, impossible to combine a high-profile job and a family life. You just have to lay down some clear boundaries.
Like
sometimes,
what?
Well, I try not to leave home in the morning before about 7:45 because I help get our children up, one of whom goes to school, and I try to make sure that a couple of nights a week I'm back in decent time, one night a week at least to sort of bath the kids and do that. But you've got to try and keep a balance, not just for the family, but also I think it helps you make better decisions. If you're permanently exhausted and frazzled and going from one meeting to the next, you'll forget what you're trying to do.
And you've got a house in the country and you've got a vegetable patch and you've won awards for your tomatoes. This is all correct, isn't it?
This is, yes. I mean, I have to say the village show that I entered, Samantha, my wife, said actually she wasn't clear that there was anyone between the ages of 6 and 60 who had entered their vegetables apart from me. But I think digging a garden is a good way of switching off as well, and good fun, and good for you. So,
and Samantha's got a full-time job, and your 3 children are all under 5. Yeah. So deciding to take on the leadership of the Tory party must have been a huge decision.
It was a big decision, and I didn't do it lightly. I always thought there was a good prospect, a fair prospect of winning the competition.
Did you?
To become leader. I did. That might sound arrogant, but I thought it was very important to think it through and think, can I cope with it? Can my family cope with it? Is it the right thing to do? And
so there was a slight hesitation. I mean, you might have thought, perhaps it's my turn next time. Here are these people called Clark and Rifkind and Fox and Davis and, they've all been at it far longer than me.
I did think about that after the as you put it, the third election defeat. I stopped and thought about it, and Samantha, we talked about it a lot. She was in 2 minds about it. On the one hand, worried about the effect on the family, but on the other hand, having faith in me, which is good to know. And she was keen for me to go for it.
But you must have been, as so many people were, amazed when it happened. They were only 4 years an MP. I'm sorry to keep stressing this, but it is true, isn't it? With minimal only shadow ministerial experience, how could you have expected to get it? And isn't it amazing that you did?
Well, I suppose it is in a way, but I think I had a very clear campaign saying what needs to change in the party and being quite uncompromising about that and not trying to please everybody by saying what they wanted to hear, but by saying some of the things that I think they needed to hear. And I think by being clear, that's why my campaign sort of struck a chord and why I'm at the party conference in what was rather an extraordinary week. It did just take off.
Record number 1, tell me about that.
Well, this is Tangled Up in Blue by Bob Dylan. I think this song is him at his most poetic, and I've chosen the live version because he actually changes some of the lyrics in the live version, and I think the sound of the audience listening to him and responding would help me feel less alone on my desert island.
He was married when they first met to a man 4 times of age. Penniless. It was time to bust out. In that rolling car as far as the cut, hidden in a hat. Swinging up on a dark sand night, but my green hat was bad. She tied my luggage in.
That's Bob Dylan and Tangled Up in Blue, the live version from Real Live album. Your ancestors, David Cameron, have been tangled up in blue for years. I think there's some distant MPs in the family, yeah?
There are, but no, my father was a stockbroker for 40 years. He still is, actually. My mother was a magistrate for many years, and my grandparents weren't involved in politics, but my great-grandfather, I think on my mother's side, was MP in Berkshire, and quite a few before him. I think before they sort of really had to get elected. I think there was a bit of rotten boroughs going on, probably.
And one of them put a tax on food, which is always a bad idea in any era.
What it was a sort of early political memory, was we had this poster of my, I suppose, my great-grandfather's Liberal opponent in the 1905 election, and the Liberal candidate had outlined all of the food taxes and other taxes that my great-grandfather had voted for, and this was probably the leaflet that helped to get rid of him in the 1905 elections.
There are also royal connections in the family tree, aren't there? But on the wrong side of the blanket, I gather.
Actually, after becoming leader of the Conservative Party, I sort of discovered more about my family than I knew before. And suddenly,
people do it for you.
People do all this work, and suddenly find out that you're descended from the mistress of a royal household or something like that.
This is Mrs. Jordan, Dora Jordan, mistress of William IV, I gather, who was an actress. And royal bastard is a bit of a theme, really, in your family, because Sam is also descended, is she not?
That's from Nell Gwynn, I think.
Yes.
One of the things that happened very early on in the leadership, I suddenly got this thing pushed through my door, and it was one of my neighbours who's Portuguese, had this article from a Portuguese paper, and the headline was Real Bastardo. And I asked someone what that meant, and the first time they said, I think it means real bastard. And I said, no, that can't be right. And then they found it, no, royal bastard.
So we're safe to presume, I guess, that the family on your mother and father's side were kind of tangled up in blue down through the ages. But was it, when you were at home as a boy in the old rectory, Newbury, was it
the old
political?
Rectory Peasmore. It wasn't a very political family. We talked a lot about issues and things, and we were a very close family, having sort of dinner together and watching the news and talking about things. But all through sort of school, most of university, I wasn't really clear about what I wanted to do.
But you were quite precocious, I read, as a little boy.
Yeah, I've been told that.
Talked a lot.
Yeah.
And you were fat.
Yes, quite. I mean, not sort of, I don't know, I wouldn't have broken the scales.
I thought your nickname was Pavarotti at one point.
Oh, that was one friend did call you. That is true, someone did call me Pavarotti once. It was never that bad, with respect to Pavarotti, obviously, who's, I'm sure, got these things well under control. But no, I was quite tubby as a child.
Record number 2.
Well, this would really just remind me of my childhood. This is Ernie, the Fastest Milkman in the West by Benny Hill. And I just remember playing this at home over and over again. And when you're asked to sing a song, this is, I'm afraid, about the only song to which the words I can always remember all of them.
So give us a quick blast before Benny Hill does. Go on.
Benny Hill do it.
How does it begin? Just quote it.
You can hear the hoofbeats pound as they race across the ground, the clatter of the wheels as they span round and round. It's wonderful stuff.
That was Ernie, the Fastest Milkman in the West by Benny Hill. Suggestive or what?
Well, I know it's a sort of early love song, really, and rivalry, but, wonderful universal themes. I haven't heard it for ages, and that was bliss.
So off to Eton, lots of not particularly good O-levels, I gather. How many did you get?
I think I got 12 O-levels, so lots of them, but not particularly good grades. I didn't really get going academically until I started specialising in doing A-levels. And I loved all of them and had a great time.
Straight A's and an exhibition to Brasenose to read PPE. I'm still really looking, though, for the point when political ambition seized you, when you decided you wanted to change the world. Because, again, you get to Oxford and there's no history of you in the Conservative Club or in the Union.
I think that's right. I didn't wake up and have one epiphanous moment when I decided, politics was what I wanted to do and I wanted to be a politician. I think I was a member of the Conservative Association, but I didn't go to the Union very much. I had lots of other things I was doing.
But you were a member of a rather exclusive club called the Bullingdon Club.
Yes, I was hoping we might not come on to that.
You tell me. Well, you describe it.
Well, I mean, I suppose, as the man said, when I was young and irresponsible, I was young and irresponsible. I mean, it was Oxford is a very sort of quite a clubby place and quite a sort of drink-fueled place, and I suppose, like others, I probably drank too much and did things I shouldn't have done, but nothing too heinous, I hope.
But you had to be an old Etonian.
No, It certainly wasn't exclusively.
But you had to be invited.
Yes, it was just a dining club. There are lots of different sort of...
It was more than just a dining club. There's an initiation ceremony, isn't there, that when your rooms get wrecked, isn't that
There
right?
was sort of rather stupid things. But as I say, nothing, I don't think anything too heinous to remember.
And when it met, it sort of went on
But it just,
binges and destruction.
Drank too much and fell over like lots of people do and shouldn't. But no, not my proudest moment, I suppose.
And is this the repository for youthful indiscretions, then?
Well,
you know what I'm asking. I mean, is
Yes.
this where you smoked the spliff or snorted the coke?
No, I had a good time at university. I worked moderately hard, but on the question you're hinting darkly at, I think it's fair in life to say, you're entitled to a private past that can be both private and in the past. And whereas as a politician today, people are entitled to, poke around and have a look at my life, and they do, and that's fine.
It's just that obviously your coyness about answering it, if one can call it that, leads one to feel there's something sort of bigger and more to know. I mean, wouldn't it have been easier? I agree, you can't move now. You can't go back on your word now.
All you can do in life, I think, is work out what you think the right dividing line is. And I think the right dividing line is a past that's private, when you didn't know you were going to be a politician and you probably said and did things you shouldn't have done. And the current, where, you put yourself forward and you're in public life. And so to have that dividing line, I think, is right.
The problem is, as you know, there will always be people who will go on trying to find out.
Yeah.
And the suspicion, therefore, arises, if you don't say, yes, when I was in the Bullingdon Club, I did all that stuff, that they think, well, therefore, perhaps it happened later when you were in a more responsible position, maybe in Whitehall.
Well, as I've said, I think I've sort of set out the right way of talking about it. It was gone through in the leadership election in quite a lot of detail. Sure. And I thought what was interesting, in a way, was after a bit, it was just dropped because I think people recognised that we're entitled to a private past and they didn't want people to go on about it.
Echo number 3.
This is Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. One of my great friends in life and at university, we were in the same sort of almost next door rooms in Brasenose, called James Ferguson, and he had a guitar and he was notoriously slow at learning it, and it took him a whole term, I think, to just get to Wish You Were Here, which got this wonderful sort of chord sequence. I used to go off to lectures and come back afterwards and he'd still be in bed playing his guitar, and he got a pretty good degree too, so maybe this was the right approach, but I'd always think of him and happy times at university.
So you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain? Can you tell a green field from a cold steel rail? A smile from a
That was Pink Floyd and Wish You Were Here. I gather too, David, while we're poking around in the Cameron long grass, that the Soviets once tried to recruit you, is that right?
Well, I can't prove that this is true, but in my year between school and university, I worked in Hong Kong for a while, and then I travelled on the Trans-Siberian Railway across Russia. So this was 1985, and so it was sort of pre-Gorbachev. And then I met a great friend in Moscow. Then we went down to the Black Sea, and we were on the beach in Yalta. And these two Russians, who both spoke perfect English, sort of turned up on the beach, which was mainly reserved for sort of foreign tourists, and took us out to dinner and interrogated us very friendly way about life in England and what we thought and politics. And, we were obviously very careful and guarded in what we said. But later on, when I got to university, my politics tutor said that was a definite attempt. And so when I was vetted for my job at the Treasury...
Yes, on your MI5 file.
Yeah, no, there must be a file somewhere, because when I became a special advisor in the Treasury some years later, they asked about that. I visited communist countries, and so I told this story. And the vetting officer was filling a notebook full of... Anyway, all probably completely harmless.
So you got in, as you say, into Conservative Central Office. 1988, you were really there, I think you said, at the high watermark of the Thatcher years. But you'll have had a ringside seat at the downfall of Mrs. Thatcher. Presumably that was pretty unedifying.
It was. It was unedifying, and... it was sort of amazing that someone who had, won elections for our party and done so much was getting turfed out in this way. But on the other hand, the poll tax had done a huge amount of damage, and you could feel that from inside Central Office. But it was a very sad time, and particularly those pictures of Mrs. Thatcher leaving Downing Street obviously were, very powerful images.
You worked for Norman Lamont, you worked for Michael Howard after she'd gone, but then suddenly 1994, you up and off and go to work in business in Carlton Communications. Why would you do that when, as I understand it, your friends by then had realised that you could well be capable of achieving high office? Why would you suddenly walk out on it all?
Well, I wanted to get some experience of business life and to see the commercial world and learn.
Did you think then you might like to be Prime Minister?
No, I didn't. I mean, no one ever believes this. But actually, I don't think most people go into politics thinking, I want to be Prime Minister.
Well, a lot of them do.
Well, it's a mixture, I think, there's a mixture in all politicians of some egotism and some altruism. And I think we've got to be honest and just hope that the balance is a reasonable one.
And then you were elected in 2001 as MP for Whitney Douglas Hurd and Sean Woodward's old seat.
That's
We'll
right.
talk more about that in a minute, but let's have record number 4.
Well, this is Mendelssohn's On Wings of Song, which was sung at our wedding in 1996. And it was, I mean, it's still, when I look back, it's still sort of the happiest day of my life. And when I hear this, I can see myself in the church sitting next to Sam. And it'd be lovely to have on the desert island.
Was Kiri Te Kanawa with Mendelssohn's On Wings of Song with the Utah Symphony Orchestra conducted by Julius Rudel. And memories, David Cameron, of your marriage to Sam in 1996, as you say. Yours is altogether a very blessed story for the most part, you know, as you've described, conventional, rounded, happy, high-achieving, undramatic. And then in 2001, you and Sam had your first child, Ivan. How long was it before you realised something was wrong with him?
It was a few days, I mean, only a few days, and we went home to Sam's parents' house in Oxfordshire, and we just noticed he was having these sort of strange movements, very sudden, jerky movements. And, you know, you obviously worry about everything as a parent, and you start asking questions, and initially we were told it was fine, and then we took him to hospital, and they ran some tests and said that he had this very rare condition, which has very poor outcomes in terms of means you're very disabled and can't really do a lot of things. But it's a combination of epilepsy and cerebral palsy, and so it was a sort of complete shock.
And he needs 24-hour care. I don't know what the prognosis is, but
they've never really got to the bottom of exactly what was the cause, but they just can describe the symptoms, and he does need 24-hour care. He's a wonderful boy, and he's got those lovely sort of eyes, and he definitely interacts with us, the way he looks at you and the way he moves his head and things. But he often is in a lot of pain, and he has the thing that worries us is his quality of life, and trying to make sure he has a good quality of life. But we're very positive, optimistic people. We're determined to, give him all we can and make sure he's part of a happy family. Was
there a moment when you realised you could do that? Obviously, when you're first told these things, it must be a very surreal experience.
It is, because it hits you like like almost mourning the loss of something, because I think you're mourning the gap between your expectation and what has happened. And so it does take a lot of time to get over. But there was a sort of moment, I remember driving home from the John Radcliffe Hospital and just thinking, we're going to get through this. And thinking, if we can't do a good job and look after him, then we've failed. And I think, we do our best. And he's a lovely boy, but he has a tough life.
The cause, as you say, hasn't been fully diagnosed, and presumably they don't know then whether it's hereditary or where it comes from.
Yes, they've sort of they gave us a sort of blended probability. They said, well, if it is genetic and inherited, then it could be a sort of 1 in 4 chance of it happening again. But if it isn't, it's more like 1 in a million. So sort of blended probability, they said, of 1 in 20.
But it means that every pregnancy is a gamble. So it's a big decision even to have another pregnancy. Yeah. And you had Nancy, she's 2.
She's 2.
And she's fine.
She's fine. She's wonderful. And she's very good with him as well, actually, very protective and always cuddling him.
And then earlier this year you produced Arthur.
That's right.
And he's
so far, when I last saw him rather early this morning...
but it must be a nerve-wracking business.
It is, because when Arthur and when Nancy were born, obviously we were watching them like hawks, and so instead of that great elation at birth, there's still some elation, but you're watching very, are they going to make a strange movement? Is everything going to be all right? And so the first week, 2 weeks is very tense.
So all of that, obviously, explains what we were talking about at the very beginning here, that you want to retain a balance between home and family. You can't suddenly not take a full and active part as a father in this family, and yet at the same time you've got this thing called the Conservative Party, which is desperately in need, on the other hand. The chances of you being pulled in two different directions.
You just have to have very clear boundaries. And also we're very lucky because we can afford extra help for Ivan. He does need round-the-clock care. And we get a very good deal, actually, from the local social services who help. And he has someone who sleeps with him at night, several nights a week. And we help still more with extra support. So we're lucky like that. I recognise lots of families can't do that. And it would be more difficult to do my job if I didn't have that sort of help.
Number 5.
Radiohead's one of my favourite bands, and Fake Plastic Trees is a beautiful song. And I went to a Radiohead concert the other day, met Tom York, and
he played this for you.
He did. I sent rather sort of sad letter saying I'd love to come to the concert. Thank you for inviting me. P.S. Please play this, my favourite song. And he did.
Radiohead and Fake Plastic Trees. Compassionate conservatism is your line, borrowed, I think, from George Bush's 2000 campaign. You've emphasised the compassion, is what people would say, and, disability provision and end to child poverty, and green policies, of course. But people are saying, when are you going to address the conservatism? And I don't mean, when do your policy reviews come home to roost? I mean, what of the fundamental conservative beliefs ring big bells with you?
Well, I think at the heart of everything I say and do and what the Conservative Party stands for are 2 big principles. The first is trusting people, is trying in everything to give more power and responsibility to people and to families. And the second is sharing responsibility, recognising that Conservatives believe that government doesn't have all the answers.
But in not mentioning the key policies that are so close to the heart of the diehards, of the Tory grassroots, actually, are you, in fact, willing to alienate them, as it were? Can you manage without them? Is that the strategy?
I don't want to alienate anybody. The way I think about it is that,
But you're not giving them what they want, is the point.
Political parties should be like a well-tuned orchestra, and it's got to have a brass section and a string section. And I think the problem in the past is perhaps we just emphasised some points and some policies more than others. And there was a danger that the Conservative Party was becoming the tax cut, crime and immigration party.
You overdosed on right-wing ideology, as you said.
What people want to know is a balance. They want to see that your concerns mirror their concerns.
But it must be that you've worked out that can work for you, as it were, and that what you've identified is this, right, what people say you've identified is that there is some middle ground, the middle ground swingers, as it were, if we can call them that, who move from one side to the other, and they are 10% of the electorate, and you're after them, hence the green policies and hence the compassion.
I look at it in a slightly different way, that I think what you ought to do in politics is take your values, trusting people, sharing responsibility, apply them to the big problems of the day, and just say what you think and say what you believe. And if that means that sometimes you're going to agree with your opponents, be relaxed about that. In a way, the mistake the Conservative Party made was when Tony Blair came along and plonked himself firmly in the middle of British politics. Some Conservative politicians kept asking, well, how can we create some distance between us and this man who's taken the centre ground of British politics? Well, that, to me, is the wrong thing to say. And so if Tony Blair does or says some things that we agree with, we should say so.
Sure, but it's a similar exercise then, really, to the one that New Labour carried out in the 1990s, isn't it? Which is to move towards the middle ground, put your party activists, just tell them to hush up a minute because this is where you're going to win it. The crusty old majors who want hard lines on immigration and crime and law and order. You've got to leave them behind.
I've changed the emphasis very clearly and moved the Conservative Party back to where it belongs, which is in the mainstream of British politics.
So why don't you give yourselves another name, as in New Labour? What about New Conservative?
I just don't think that's... I think that's the weakness of Labour, is just you sort of change the name on the bottle.
Next record.
Well, this is This Charming Man by the Smiths. I probably don't agree with their lead singer Morrissey about anything. He's a passionate vegetarian and I'm a big meat eater. But when he burst onto the scene and appeared on Top of the Pops with flowers hanging out the back of his trousers and the NHS hearing aid, it was a sort of iconic moment for people of my age and generation.
Punctured bicycle on a hillside desolate. Will nature make a man of me yet? When in this charming car, this charming man, why pamper life's complexity when the leather runs smooth on the passenger seat?
That's the Smiths and This Charming Man. The recent local elections have been very encouraging for you, for the Conservatives, but William Hague did nearly as well in the 2000 local elections, I think, and was humiliated a year later, as I'm sure you know only too well, in the general election. It's a huge mountain you have to climb. It's a huge cephalogical mountain, is it not? Never been climbed before.
Massive mountain, no doubt about it. To get 40% of the vote, as we did in the local elections, when over a third of people are turning out is one thing, but to get over 40% when 2/3 of people are voting at a general election is an entirely different and greater thing. And I'm well aware of the mountain we have to climb.
There's a shortcut, of course, which is coalition with the Lib Dems. Well, that could bring real hope of office.
I don't think it profits politicians at all to sort of try and posit ideas like that. I hope a lot of Liberal Democrat supporters and voters will come and support us, particularly now the Conservative Party is back in the mainstream and has got a big commitment to the environment.
But do you rule out coalition?
Well, I want to win the election outright, and I don't think it's sensible to...
But if you didn't, would you consider it?
Well, I just don't want to speculate on what might happen if there was a hung parliament.
So you're not ruling out coalition or the possibility of coalition?
I'm ruling in the attempt to win the next election outright.
And reveal your preferences, if you will, for the Labour leader. And I'm not offering you an open goal here. I'm saying, is it in the Tory interests now, you must have considered this time and again, to battle on against a Prime Minister perceived to be lamed, whose strength is ebbing and against whom you can make political capital? Or would it be better to bring in the new guy, Gordon Brown, if it be he, and see if you can knock the gloss off him before a general election?
Well, I think
Tony
Blair has been a very difficult politician for Conservatives to defeat. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, to be frank, I think probably we'll do better after, he's beaten us 3 times. And
Which of them worries you more at the dispatch box?
Well, I've never faced Gordon Brown at the dispatch box.
So he worries you more, then?
I mean, in a way, I enjoy enjoy is too strong a way of putting it, but Prime Minister's questions with Tony Blair, there's some sort of light and shade because he's got a sense of humour and there are always light moments as well as very serious moments. I'm not sure with Gordon how many light moments there will be. One
last quick question on that, though. I mean, you had to join the Punch and Judy game in the end, didn't you? You said you wouldn't, but there you go.
I still try to. I mean, last week at Prime Minister's Questions, I asked a set of questions about AIDS, drugs in Africa, which I'd asked questions about before, and I've helped to change government policy a bit. And I'll go on doing positive things.
But you're still thinking up the Clever Clogs lines in the back room, aren't you? He had a future once and a fossil-fuelled Chancellor. That's the game. That's called Punch and Judy.
The House of Commons is a theatre, and...
you've given in on that one?
No, I haven't, because I think what matters most is, are you being constructive in politics? Have I called for every Labour minister to resign? No, I haven't. Yes, in the House of Commons, it is quite theatrical, and
you still enjoy bopping one?
You have to do a bit of bopping, I suppose, from time to time.
Thank you. Record number 7.
This is Perfect Circle by R.E.M. When Sam and I first started going out with each other, we didn't share that much in the way of musical tastes, and we were living quite different lives. I was working for Norman Lamont in the Treasury, and she was a student at what was Bristol Polytechnic. She's a brilliant artist, but one thing we did agree on, that early R.E.M. was good, and this would remind me of those days of driving down to Bristol to her student flat and falling in love.
stay real close. Who might leave you where I left off? The perfect circle of acquaintances and friends. Drink another coin of phrase.
That's A Perfect Circle by R.E.M. Max Hastings, the former editor of the Daily Telegraph, came up with what I suspect a lot of Tories might feel about you. Have you come across this quote? He said, "It's like going for a test in a prototype aeroplane. Things could be wonderful and exciting. You just hope the bloody thing can fly." I mean, do you know you can fly?
Well, I have a clear view of what the Conservative Party should do. I've got a clear view about the big issues facing this country.
But you must have terrible dreams about failing. I mean, it's like the exam dream, isn't it? You know, I mean, suddenly being made to look a fool or...
Of course, and you know, it is true the first law of politics is sort of don't screw up. But the main thing is, do you know what needs to be done? Have we got the right ideas and right values for dealing with those things? I think we have. But it's tough. There will be mistakes, and as you're right, there is always the risk that your best won't be good enough.
Last record.
This is quite up to date. This is all these things I've done by the Killers, and this, whenever I'm tired and I've got to sort of go out and do something, this song just wakes me up and lifts me, and I think, yes, off we go. And I listened to it a lot during the sort of leadership election when I was sort of thinking about the next speech or the next idea, and it's a great song.
These things that I've done by the Killers. Now, if you could only take one of those 8 records, David, which one would you take?
Very difficult, but I think it would be Tangled Up in Blue by Bob Dylan. I think I'd like the sound of when I got lonely, the sound of the audience at the beginning, and that wonderful rasping voice and guitar it would remind me of all the other songs, and I'd sit there sort of strumming away on the beach, I suppose. What
about your book as well as the Bible and Shakespeare?
Well, I think I'd go for Hugh Fearnley Whittingstall's River Cottage cookbook. I love cooking, and I think his books are brilliant. And also he manages to make recipes make brilliant food out of whatever is available.
A lot of offal.
A lot of offal. But everything from eel to a pig's trotter, which I tried to cook the other day, and it was disgusting. But I think it's a brilliant book, and I love food. I'm very greedy, and I'd sit there cooking away.
And your luxury?
I've had real trouble over this. I mean, I'm a very practical person, so I thought perhaps a fishing rod. And then I thought, actually, I love a little drink late at night, reflecting on the day, and I love drinking whiskey. So I thought I'd take a crate of whiskey, possibly from Jura. We go there every year. Total peace, lovely sandy beaches. So I'd sit supping away, looking out to sea and thinking of my friends and Sam and all the people I've been missing.
David Cameron, thank you very much indeed for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
Thank you, it's been wonderful.
You've been listening to a podcast from the Desert Island Discs archive. For more podcasts, please visit bbc.co.uk/Radio4.